Welcome back to Behind the Brief. Today we have a very special guest of the most influential and GTM product marketing leaders in B2B SaaS, founder of Manta Consulting, and a fantastic mentor and advisor. Hi, Jonathan, and thank you so much for coming on my show. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Shruti. Excited to be here. I think you covered it well. Founded Manta Consulting, work with B2B SaaS startups on their product marketing and go-to-market. Also do quite a bit of mentoring through 1871, a local Chicago incubator, as well as ADP List. Yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome. So I'm really excited about the topics that we are going to discuss today, which are mostly focusing on GTM and consulting, how you do it really flawlessly. I would like to start with, you have worked with startups where leaders are open to change, but what happens when they are not? Can you share a time when someone resisted your advice? You are a consultant, you work as a fractional PMM. So maybe they've ignored customer feedback or stuck with a pricing model that was not working. And how did you handle that without starting a fire?
Yeah, that happens a decent amount of the time. I think I managed to avoid most of it, but it does come up every once in a while. I think there's two kind of examples that come to mind. So one was, we did a ton of work to help a startup launch a product, and along the way, we did a ton of customer research, like more customer research than I've ever done to launch a product. From before it was built, like with the product management team, like really finding out what is it the customers want. We did several rounds of that. We did position messaging research. We did pricing and packaging research. It was I think it was like 6 rounds of research to launch this one product. And we kept hearing over and over and over in various ways, we're not really interested. We don't really want to pay for this. This is helpful. This is nice, but it's not really a must have. And we kept hearing that over and over and over in different forms. First, it started off when building the product. People were like, yeah, I mean, this is a pain point. Sure, you can solve it, but they weren't like very excited about it. There wasn't like a lot of motivation on their end. Then once we built the product, they were like, yeah, this is cool. That's interesting. Sure. When we started talking about position messaging, they were like, yeah, I would probably treat it as, any other kind of, an insert category here. And then when we got to pricing and packaging, they were kind of cagey with their answers. Like it was very clear that they really didn't want to pay for this.
Yeah.
And in the beta, we were like, oh, okay, if the beta goes well, would you be open to paying for this? Like transition to a paid customer? And they kept saying no. So we went to the chief product officer, we went to the chief strategy officer, we went to the CEO, and we said, hey, we shouldn't launch this. It's not a good idea. It's just customers don't want it. And C-suite basically said, no, we're going to launch it anyway. So they did, and it did not go well. Basically, I mean, adoption was very, 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 very low. It confused prospects because it made the pricing more complex of the overall solution. It was an add-on. And yeah, it was kind of the first time where, C-suite just completely ignored customer feedback. And this happened a long time ago. And I didn't really know how to react. And what I did for the second time we helped them was I integrated kind of what we wanted to see. So what we wanted to hear from customers. So, hey, we want to hear this level of enthusiasm, or we want customers to expect to say this level of pricing, or we want them to, we want to get this kind of response when we reach out to our customers or prospects to see if they're interested in giving us feedback on that. But yeah, it was really, really interesting use case of not listening to customers. And again, exactly what we thought would happen, which is it didn't sell. The second time we had this issue was we were at a startup where sales wasn't hitting the numbers that they expected. And the CRO was a little bit more old school and was saying, okay, well, we're just going to hire more sales reps. And from a product marketing perspective, I'm like, well, no, instead of hiring more sales reps, let's make the current ones more effective. Right. So I think the SDR team had I want to say like a 1% efficiency or 1% conversion rate, meaning from they reach out to 100 people, only one person bites for a demo, which is really low. So I was like, okay, well, what if we work with them and we double their conversion rate, which is pretty easy to do. 1 to 2% is not a huge lift. Wouldn't that make way more sense than spending thousands and thousands of dollars on hiring more people? And this was back in, pre-2021 when money was cheap and, startups had a ton of funding. And he was like, no, we're just going to hire more reps. And I didn't win that battle either. I didn't convince them that, to not do that. I still made their reps better, right? We still worked with their team and said, okay, how are we going to make the SDR conversion better? How are we going to make the sales demos once they get to the AE better, et cetera? But the reality was it didn't work. So what I do now moving forward, right, to answer your question, how do you handle this? Moving forward, the first part is selection criteria. On my LinkedIn, in the conversations I have with prospects, I tell them hey, if you're open to change and you're open to new ways of doing things, we're going to be a great team.
Right.
If you're more focused on kind of the way you do things today and you just want to do more of that, it's probably not the best fit. That's kind of the number one way to prevent it. The second and third way is, as a consultant, you really have to show that you're kind of a third party and you're not biased, right? Like I don't like, sure, would I love every client to listen to me? Yes. But at the end of the day, if I give them advice and they go a different direction, like I'm not losing sleep, right? I've told them what they need to know or what I think they need to know. So I tell them that. I remind them. I say, look, Shruti, like I don't have a horse in this race. Like I don't gain anything if you do or don't take
Right.
my advice. But I'm sharing this advice based on, X number of years of doing this at, I don't even know how many companies, a few dozen companies. Like this is what typically works. And there's no reason why it shouldn't work in this situation. Obviously, customized to your specific use case or your specific
Right.
customer or your specific company. And that usually kind of helps them move along. And then the other thing is, I think you worded it well when you said, how do you handle that without starting the
Yeah.
fire, right? You start off with your primary contact and then you expand beyond that because your primary contact, let's say, is a CMO. You work with them first before going to like the CRO or CEO. You kind of keep it contained, have that conversation, and then broaden it.
Yeah, I think it's really important when you're starting out in consulting. It must have been a huge learning curve to come to a point where you can actually say no to prospects. Now, if you're
Hmm.
not going to take my advice, then let's not, go ahead with the contract. I think a lot of people, just like me, who are actually diving into consulting, should have some patience and take some time to actually see what works for you and what doesn't. You don't always have to say yes.
Oh,
Feel
for
that's a,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and look, like I had a prospect, I think it was like a month ago, who
Mhm.
said that they wanted to solve all of their product marketing challenges in 7 weeks. And if there were any after those 7 weeks, they would consider it not a success. And I was like,
Wow.
great, I'm not a good fit. That's literally not possible. I was like, if you find any consultant who can do this, one, I'd be shocked, but two, they're probably lying. Like, how
Yeah,
can you solve all product marketing challenges in 7 weeks when you're starting from
exactly.
scratch? Like it's just not possible. But
It's like you have zero risk appetite and you cannot, just
right.
look beyond 2 months. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's really
just
crazy.
yeah. So yeah, you learn to say no.
Yeah, that's right. Moving on to my second question, and I feel we all have been there where we know there's a perfect GTM strategy. We all know it's going to work really well on paper, but when reality hits, you know what happens. So tell us about a time when you had to actually scrap that part of your strategy halfway through. You have to pivot, you have to rework on your messaging or target audience. How did you do that? And, just without freaking everyone because there are so many people aligned. How do you manage that?
That's a great question. That happened to me last year. I was doing a pricing and packaging project for a client, and essentially the entire company was aligned, or at least the entire company didn't know, right? But at least the people who were aligned, so maybe like the top 10 to 15 leaders in the company were all aligned. Hey, this is the new direction we're going. We're going to launch this product, which is going to be like the flagship product for the company, and pricing and packaging is going to revolve around that product plus these other ancillary products that already exist. Okay, great. So I started working on this pricing and packaging project. I've spent, I don't know, maybe a month or two already on this. Again, the entire strategy is baked around this product, and the client tells me, oh, we're actually not going to sell that product publicly. It's just going to be through select partners, and we need to completely overhaul our pricing strategy to not include that product. And keep in mind, it's not just that it's a flagship product, it was the number one differentiator. So,
Wow.
imagine you have, a suite of products, let's say 5 products, all four of them are kind of very similar to competitors, and you have this one that's just completely different and easily makes you stand apart. And that's the one that they're like, no, we're not going to let you
Wow.
include that in the pricing and packaging. So that was massive. That was like a massive shift. I had a lot of conversations with the CMO, with the CFO, with the product marketing team, with the product team, just to figure out like, okay, we're starting essentially from scratch. And I just worked a lot of late nights to just say, okay, what does the new plan look like? So a lot of that was, trying to like one, appearing calm and saying like commiserating with people and say, look, this is tough. We're going to get through it. But two, just coming up with a plan really, really quickly and trying
Mm.
to iterate and just have
Yeah.
something for people to react to. That made people feel like, okay, it took the focus off of, hey, we've shifted our strategy to, hey, I need your feedback on this particular thing. So people already got into like doing mode, if that makes sense, like into
Yeah.
execution mode. So that really helped. That same client though, the fun wasn't over. That same client, we were like, okay, we're gonna develop these two PLG offers. What should those PLG offers include from a product perspective? So like features, and then also develop the pricing and packaging for that. So I was like, okay, cool, I can do that. So I spent, I don't know, 30 days, 45 days doing that. Really robust, like a lot of internal conversations,
Mhm.
some customer research, a lot of like pricing and packaging models, a lot of cost analysis, value-based pricing, so on and so forth, and developed these two models. Everyone agreed internally. And from the beginning, because like this isn't my first rodeo. Like I've worked cross-functionally for
Yeah.
I don't know, almost I don't know, a decade and a half at this point. So I went to the product team and I said, "Hey, are we prepared to do this?" And they said, "Yeah, yeah, no problem." Okay, great. When I finished all this work, that's when the product team said, "Yeah, we actually don't have bandwidth nor capacity to do this, to like create these PLG products." So all of that work from figuring out what features to put in it, the
Mhm.
pricing and packaging for it, how to offer it to this particular client base literally went out the window. And the whole point was that was going to help us with product adoption goals
Mhm.
that we were trying to hit. So
Right.
again, had to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what does product adoption look like now? And how do we basically create a pricing and packaging offering that works there,
Right.
or that makes us helps us hit our product adoption goals. Sorry, I keep saying product adoption. I mean market penetration. I'm sorry. So yeah, it was incredibly tough. That one was probably harder. I think it was just a ton of time kind of spent on that. What we ended up saying was, okay, we've done the work up front. You can use this, in 6 months and a year when you're ready to
Mhm.
launch that PLG offering. And today we basically, at the moment, we basically said, okay, we're going to focus on the other four products instead rather than the PLG motion and focus on basically what we're selling today and create the strategy around that. So again, I think they're like everyone was kind of in it together. The ground was shifting underneath our feet together,
Mhm.
and trying not to freak people out was basically saying, look, the good news is we already have this data because we've been selling these products for a while. We're going to focus on how to move forward and not so much on, the spilled milk that we can't do anything about. So, yeah, that was tough. That's for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine when you put so much of your efforts into building something and then you actually have to wait for it to actually go live. Also, moving on, you've been such a great fractional leader. You have been doing so many things as a consultant. You definitely guide teams without formal authority. So, how do you get people on board with such big changes? Maybe a story where you convinced a skeptical sales team to try a new pitch, or shifted a new pricing model, or how you handled that situation.
Yeah, that definitely comes up a lot as well. Because usually when you're brought on as a consultant or fractional, you have buy-in from maybe like 1 to 3 people. So it's usually your main contact, maybe their manager if they're not the CEO, right? So
Right.
I usually work with like C-suite or one level below. So say like VP of marketing, VP of product, VP of sales, and or CMO, CRO, CPO. So maybe you talk to them and then the CEO and maybe one other person, but the rest of the organization, to your point, isn't really bought in or doesn't really know what you do, why you're there, so on and so forth. So you really do need to basically act. You really do need to build relationships really quickly, get folks on board without formal authority. And it's a little bit different from traditional product marketing roles because in traditional roles, you have time. So you can build relationships over 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then launch your big product. It's, you don't necessarily have that as a consultant. You basically need to do something in the first week. A few examples here. One, kind of when I sell myself, the way I sell myself initially during the pitch, like
Mhm.
I'm not a very salesy person. I don't really do a ton of like sales methodologies or anything like that. What I do is I listen and I really get to understand the customer needs or the prospect's needs, I should say. So everything I do is custom based on their needs. So they tell me, hey, I'm facing this dilemma. My team is missing this, or customers are saying this, or competition's doing that. Great. Let me build a custom proposal based on that. And at the very beginning of the proposal, I literally repeat it. There's a slide or two that repeats like, hey, Shruti, you told me that this was the issue, this was the impact it was having on your business, and this is why you needed it solved yesterday. And by the way, the outcome of this collaboration is going to be XYZ thing.
Yeah.
So that kind of sets the tone for us being aligned. And then the rest of the proposal is basically explaining how I'm going to solve that issue. So I think getting that kind of entry to a consulting or fractional engagement really helps. But then to your point, so you have buy-in and kind of a sponsorship from those key folks. What's really important is that they do a really good job introducing you. So explaining to the team like, hey, Jonathan's been doing this for over a decade. He's worked at a variety of different companies and industries. Like basically, in other words, like giving you a really powerful introduction that shares your background, your experience, your resume, why folks should listen to you based on your expertise. And then you as a consultant have to have really high emotional intelligence to come in and say, look, yes, you're changing things, but you want to change things with people, not for people. And that's a really big kind of mindset shift, especially for consultants that are a little bit newer to the game.
Mhm.
a lot of the times you feel like this pressure to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like we talk about in traditional product marketing. The goal isn't when you're selling a product as a salesperson, the goal isn't to say, hey, my product is amazing. The goal is to say, hey, you have these problems. Let
Yeah.
our solution help you overcome those problems or reach those goals, right?
Mhm.
So it's the same thing with consulting. It's saying, hey, this is the existing team that's facing this challenge. We're just
Right.
going to help you face that challenge more effectively. So when you go in with that mindset, you go in and you co-create plans. So, we tested a new positioning, or we created a new positioning. Along with that was new sales pitch. So what we did is we worked with the sales team and said, hey, we're going to build this positioning that's eventually going to turn into a sales pitch. We want you on the ground floor because, and I tell them, I'm like, I don't want to be the marketing leader that says, hey, we did all this work without consulting you, without involving you, and
Right.
now it's affecting you, and now I need you to play ball. Like, that's not how you build a relationship. That's not how you create a more effective piece of collateral, more
Mm.
effective sales pitch or positioning.
Right.
So you bring them in early, you show them you respect them, and you also show them that you understand what the outcome looks like if they're not consulted, if they're not involved, and that you recognize that other folks in the past may have burned them.
Okay.
When you have that kind of like very open dialogue, when you say, look, Shruti, I understand if you've worked with other marketers in the past that
Mhm.
maybe didn't bring in sales or didn't really listen to what you were saying.
Yeah.
I understand that sales speaks to customers more than anyone in this company. That's why we want you involved in this, and that's why we want to make sure this works for you. And then we'll build a sales pitch deck together. Is that fair? That's a
Mhm.
very, like, it's really hard to not be receptive to that
Yeah.
versus saying, like, hey, Shruti, I just spent the last 3 months with C-suite where you weren't involved building this position and messaging. We want to turn it into a sales pitch deck. I need you available for the next 3 hours on Monday,
Mhm.
or sorry, for 3 hours on Monday to work on that with me. Is that cool? That just feels like you're attacking them. You're telling them
Yeah.
you need them now. You're not involving them. You're not treating them as a peer. You're treating them as an input. That's been a very big game changer for me. And then the other part is like sometimes you just need a sales leader to choose people that are already receptive to test it
Mm.
out, right? Maybe a sales leader knows like, hey, these specific CSMs or these specific sales reps love testing. They're open to new ideas. They want to work with you. Great. Let's start with them. And then
Yeah.
they can kind of evangelize the new sales pitch deck or the new retention model or the new pricing model, whatever it is, with the rest of the sales reps.
Right. Yeah, I really like the fact that you've mentioned the importance of going with a problem solver attitude. When you do that, you actually don't attack the other person. You don't come off as a very authoritative individual. And I feel it's more productive and it works for you when you want to get things done from other people, other teams. And I think that's the best approach when you have to get your work done. And yeah, I really like this fact that you've mentioned it here.
I mean, it's literally just putting your ego aside and
Exactly.
realizing like it's not about like my goal when I come to these is like I don't
Mhm.
care if I look smart or like a good strategy or whatever. What I care about is like does my client, do my key
Mhm.
contacts and the supporting leaders and folks I interact with across the board, like do they feel like they're empowered, that they look smart, that they look good, that they're more successful in their jobs
Right.
because of the work we're doing together? If that's the case, then great. We've achieved success. Is it nice if later at the end of the engagement, folks recognize, hey, your consulting team or your fractional
Yeah.
team helped achieve that? Sure. But at the end of the day, it's a successful agreement or a successful engagement, I should say, if they achieve their goals and,
Exactly.
if they feel that they've, um, you know, succeeded because we partnered with them rather than doing the work for them or rather
Mm.
than telling them how to do things, that's just a much more successful engagement in my eyes.
Right. And I feel, isn't this the core of being a good product marketer as well? If you go with this approach, like you will be able to collaborate with all the team members. You will be able to have a relationship out of the work you are just building. Like it's not task oriented. You're building a relationship. You're trying to understand even the product team, even the sales team. And I believe if all the product marketers have that attitude and approach towards dealing with teams, dealing with people and leadership, I feel you'll make a really good product marketer in general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's a great point because you go from saying like, "Hey, can you help me launch this product?" to, "Hey,
Yeah.
the company is launching this product. Can
Mhm.
we work together to make sure that it achieves X, Y, and Z thing for your
Yeah.
team?" That's a
Exactly.
silly, but it's positioning, right? It's positioning for
Yeah.
product marketing. Um,
Exactly.
and it makes a huge difference.
When you internalize it as a approach, I feel that you are going to do really good as a product marketer in general.
Yeah, for sure. No, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So this marks the end of this show. I'm really sad about it, but I'm definitely going to follow up and pick your brain on some other topics as well, Jonathan. But I had a lovely time, and what I really try to bring from this show is to be more actionable on problems that people are facing in product marketing and marketing in general. And that's why I try to keep it very short, very question and answer format. And I'm sure people are going to find it really, really valuable from everything you've said today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on. It was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.